the industry has this perception that all women want X, like, small quartz, diamonds, And we recognize that men want a dress watch or a dive watch or a aviation themed watch or, any kind of, there'd be categories of this, and then there's just women's. That was
to the side,
yeah,
too.
to the side, yeah. That was the biggest challenge for me is to see that and try to challenge those notions, because when I was interacting with women in the collector space, I wasn't seeing any of those watches that were under the women's sign in the store on their wrists. I was seeing this kind of stuff.
Hi, everyone. Kirklyn here from Analog Shift, and I'm here with the lovely Kathleen McGivney, CEO of Red Bar, to have a conversation about her watch collection and also her presence as a very iconic female in the watch industry. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, Kirklyn. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Great to see you today.
Good to see you, too.
So, Kathleen, we're in this beautiful bar. Talk about where we are and how you're connected here.
Yeah, so we're at Albert's Bar, which is on East 41st Street in Midtown Manhattan. I came to this bar through my friend Pete, who is the co-owner of the bar. They just opened this bar less than 2 years ago. I just think it's a beautiful space. They do great food. They do great drinks. And this has become a little bit of a home away from home. We've had a few Red Bar members' birthday parties here. I've had my birthday party here. It's a really great spot. So I thought it would be a really good location for us to chat about watches.
So I think the first question we'll ask, and I think this is kind of a regular segment on your Instagram, is how many watches are you wearing today?
4.5.
4.5. So what is this half?
The half is a bracelet watch by a designer named Natalia Brilli. It's a cast piece that looks like a watch, but it's covered in leather.
Almost has like a little cyclops going on.
It's got a little cyclops. It's very cool. I wear it to watch events, and it confuses everybody. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to tell the time. It's a fashion piece more than anything.
Exactly. But it's on brand. It's on theme for me.
And let's talk about everything else you have on.
Okay. So I have a JLC Reverso on my wrist.
Classic.
Of course. I have a Timex and MM6 Margiela ring watch. I have a vintage ring watch on the other hand, and then I have a pendant watch.
So obviously everything is very different. You've got some modern, you've got some vintage, which I think that you do a great job at. Everybody that knows you knows that Margiela is Kathleen and Kathleen is Margiela. It's like a perfect marriage, so that makes sense. Let's talk about the pendant. I feel like this is something that's kind of trending lately, and I know people would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a lot of ring and pendant watches that were made, many, many years ago that was kind of more popular. And other watches, I have a brooch watch here too. But this one, I found it on Etsy of all places, because there's a lot of vintage stuff on Etsy, and it's a Bucher piece, and it's just this cool watch that is, it's upside down, as you can see when I'm wearing it this way, because it's meant to be read by the wearer when they pick it up and look at it this way. So I just think it's cool because you can hide it, and it's got this beautiful enamel, and it makes a cool accessory. But then it's an extra watch. If I want to have a different time zone, I can have it on.
I think it's funny you brought up Etsy too. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday. I feel like Etsy, in terms of watches and vintage, is really kind of blowing up out of nowhere. And I also think it's kind of putting people on the agenda of your watch doesn't have to necessarily be this high luxury brand. We love those as well, but something that's cool and casual is perfect for every day as well as a watch collector.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of why I have this mix of stuff. Like, this is a digital ring watch that was under $200, and then you've got a Reverso, which is of course a classic and icon mechanical watch, hand wound. So I can mix high and low, and still have it, and mix vintage and modern, and have it still be fun.
And I think in terms of high and low, we've talked before, how many watches are in your collection total?
80, not including G-Shocks and swatches.
And so how many G-Shocks and swatches are there?
I've
lost count.
I've lost count. I think I have about 25 G-Shocks and probably 100 swatches.
100 swatches. Where do you store all these swatches in this New York apartment?
I use a lot of those, the clear Muji bins.
Oh, nice.
So I have those. They're like little drawer bins. And so I can see all of the watches when they're in there, but they're tucked away so they're not getting damaged by, light or anything like that.
So with, over 200 watches at that rate, which is a lot.
It's kind of a lot.
What's the first watch that comes to mind as being your first official watch?
I think the first nice watch that I had when I got myself, got a good job and I got myself a watch as a reward was a Tag Heuer. It's an integrated bracelet. It's a smaller piece. It was, that's pretty much the only watch in my collection that's a watch that was marketed to women.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So most of my actually none of my watches in my current collection are women's watches.
And let's be real, I think especially in this post-COVID era, and you're starting to see brands pivot, I don't think watches have to be a gender anymore. I think watches are very gender neutral. You'll see women wearing 43 millimeter Panerais and it looks great. So that's very interesting to know that your first one was a women's watch.
Yeah, and I bought that when I was in my 20s. So, at the time I was kind of new to I was very new to watch collecting. I had swatches and stuff, but I was like, this is a nice watch. And so I just kind of bought it. And then this was way later when I got involved with Red Bar, I got much more educated about watches and really refined what I personally like. And I will agree with you too that, watches are an inherently genderless object. This thing has no gender. It doesn't matter who wears it. So I think there's a lot more of that now. You see men wearing the teeny tiny watches. You see women wearing big chunky watches. There are people that are just not caring. They're just like, I like that. I want to wear that.
And I think what's interesting too about the watch industry is, a lot of these timepieces tell stories, right? So it's more than just, oh, I like how this looks. You might have some connection to, I bought this as the first watch when I got a big job and it was really important to me and it really spoke to me, and something that you can connect to more than just aesthetics. For example, I think one that I can point out that's sitting here is like a Grand Seiko. I think knowing that Grand Seiko's dials are based off of like parts of nature in Japan, if you're like, maybe you had an amazing experience in Japan and you can connect yourself to that, I think that's a really cool part about it too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you brought in your lovely analog shift travel case today.
Yes, I'm very on brand today. No, actually, I want to talk about that watch. So the reason that I love this watch, when it first came out, they announced it. The cherry blossom theme was actually really resonated with me because it is my favorite motif in Japanese art. It's representative of kind of the ephemeral, fleeting nature of life. Cherry blossoms bloom very quickly and then they go away. In Japanese art, it's meant to represent that life is short and beautiful and you should appreciate it while it's here. So I have cherry blossoms tattooed all over me. It's a recurring theme that I have had in my life for a long time. So when that was announced, I was immediately drawn to it.
I love that. Life is short and beautiful, guys. Don't forget it.
That's right. Let's see. Let's dive into it. This piece is the Oris Diver 65 that we did with Red Bar in collaboration with Oris. We were talking to them. We wanted to do a red dial, but the red in our logo is super bright.
Yeah.
And is a little intense for a watch dial. But they went and looked in their archives and they found this kind of oxblood red color in a watch from the 70s that Oris had done.
Oh,
and
love that.
Yeah, they did this color match. They did kind of a little ombre kind of effect, so it's a little darker at the edges. It's really beautiful. At the very last minute before it was put into production, they had just released this bezel that has the bronze on the side, so we had them add that. It's one of my favorite collaborations that we've done. I love Oris. I think they, good value for money, and it's just an awesome looking watch.
And a trend that you guys will notice with Kathleen's watches is she is the queen of an Hermes strap.
Yes.
This is on an amazing kind of similar tone Hermes strap.
Yeah, it's on an Hermes strap, partially because I find them really comfortable. It sounds really bougie, but they're actually around the same price as a lot of OEM straps from other manufacturers. So I could get a strap for my Reverso from JLC, or I could walk next door to or across the street to Hermes and buy it for the same price. So it's kind of, not that big of a change, but they're super soft and comfortable. So you don't have to break them in at all. They also have some really cool colors. So there's like, I got a yellow strap from them the other day, and I have never seen, aside from like Jean Rousseau or someplace like that, you're not going to find the color range that you will find there.
And it's ironic you brought up yellow. We have something yellow here.
We do. So this one, we're going in a completely different direction, is Brew. John Ferrer, who's been a longtime member of Red Bar, is the founder of Brew. I love all the watches he does. They're all super reasonably priced. I think almost all of them are under $500. You can time different methods of brewing coffee on it.
Oh, nice.
So there's like 4 different timings for pulling like espresso shots and pour over and things like that. So it's kind of got that little extra something. But when it originally came on a black strap, and then he came out with these colorful straps as aftermarket kind of accessories. So I added it because I was like, I'm going to go yellow. I'm going to go big.
No, I think yellow makes much more sense.
Like all yellow looks amazing on this watch. Okay, let's go. What next? So this one is a Universal Jeanette pole router. There's a longer story about this watch that I wrote an article for Hodinkee about the journey to getting this watch. But I've always had an appreciation for Universal Jeanette pole routers. I'm really excited to see what, the relaunch of the brand is going to bring as well. But this one's a vintage piece, of course. I had been hunting for gold ones, because I had a few before that were steel. And I was like, I want a gold one. And then I thought, well, why am I not texting James Lambden about this? So I texted him and said, do you have any gold pole routers? And like, I want to say sub 2 minutes later, I just get a picture from him with a handful of them. And I immediately gravitated towards this one for 2 reasons. One, it's just, I love the dial. I think it's just a beautiful example, but it's got really cool fat arrow hands with radium in them.
I love the hands. I think the hands are my favorite part.
The hands were absolutely my favorite part of this watch. So I came to Analog Shift. I tried on all the watches, and I kept coming back to this one, and it needed a service. So I paid for it. I left it sadly. I looked at it with longing eyes, and then I went to Hermes and bought this strap for it. And then waited patiently until it came back from service. So it's one of my favorite vintage pieces in my collection. And the radium thing is also kind of another passion, interest of mine. Analog Shift is going to be part of a lot of these stories because I got obsessed with it from playing with watches at Analog Shift. And I picked up a watch one day when I was there, and it had shadows of where the hands had been on the dial, like a permanent
because it hadn't been wound.
Because it hadn't been wound. Yeah. So it had sat in a drawer for like 30 years. And I went, I must know everything about why that is. I just did a deep dive into that and started looking into the history and looking into, radium itself, and then turned that into a lecture for the Horological Society of New York, which was probably the most fun lecture or presentation I've ever done, because it was something I was interested in.
Super passionate
about. Yeah. I'm not, that's the only time I enjoyed making a PowerPoint.
And I think the last question I want to ask about it in conclusion, is it safe to wear a watch with radium?
Yes, it's safe to wear one. I wouldn't recommend eating a watch with radium on it, or don't lick them or anything like that. Basically, if I held a Geiger counter to this right now, you would see radioactive activity, because the half-life of the isotope of radium that was used in this is 1,600 years. So this is going to be ping-ponging radiation off of it long after we're all dead. Even though you can get a reading off of a standard Geiger counter, it's not harmful. So just don't ingest it if you are a watchmaker or you are a person with a watch that has radium on the dial or in the hands. Like, be super careful if you open it up. But if you're just wearing it and it's an intact case, you're fine.
So yeah, I think an amazing story.
Yeah.
What's next?
Let's do the Bel Canto. So this is Christopher Ward Bel Canto, and it is a chiming watch. So it chimes once at the top of the hour. It's a very cool watch. It's won many awards. It's getting a lot of love from the watch community as well. There are not a ton of watches that have this kind of movement that chime. There's a lot of chiming watches, but they're usually way more expensive.
Yeah.
It's purple dial. It's a purple strap. It's, kind of on theme when we look at the colorfulness. But I just love this piece. It's just cool.
I feel like this is like the official watch of 2024.
I think so.
Yeah. And I think Christopher Ward has truly, especially in that price point, has done an amazing job and is allowing complicated watches to be accessible, which I think is really important.
I think that's really great. And I like to see that trend happening. Like there's a couple, we saw that with, MB&F and the Mad 1. We're now seeing it with Gronefeld's with the Grone watch that they just did.
Yeah.
That's a couple grand. A lot of the mainstream brands are not taking a lot of risks, but the independent brands have the ability to do that.
Absolutely.
Whether they're playing in the price point of the Christopher Ward or they're playing in a higher price point.
I think we should talk about the brooch.
Okay, let's talk about
it was
brooch.
Covered. This could have been Kathleen's 5th watch today, but we
have
opted
been.
out.
Yeah. So this one I have it's a brooch watch. So this is a vintage piece. It's a nurse's watch. So the way they would wear them is they would pin them to their clothing, and then when they're taking the pulse of a patient, they could time it by tilting the watch up. I love that there were so many different ways to wear a watch.
Yeah.
And this was really commonplace. This is from the 40s. Like this is a thing that people would wear in order to, do their jobs.
And I mean, yeah, that was
cool.
a tool watch at the end of the day, which is interesting because it's beautiful and doesn't have the look of a diver or anything. But at the end of the day, someone wore that to work and it was a part of their uniform.
Exactly. So this is the Ming 3707. It's a mosaic dial. I really just love the brand. I love what they're doing. They have a very specific design aesthetic. The attention to detail very clearly says the person who started this brand is a watch collector, of course. So, the things like all of the lugs on every one of their watches are the same. So you can interchange the straps. They have a universal bracelet that you can put on to any of the watches they have that goes back all the way to the very first.
I didn't realize that.
1701. So it gives you a lot of versatility, but I also just love this dial. This is so cool. It's just this beautiful mosaic effect. It's a cool watch. It's very, very versatile. And I just love the brand.
I think that's a great point, though, to bring up obviously we can't reverse back onto vintage watches, but, companies moving forward, how can we make buying straps easier? From my perspective, if we buy a new watch and needs a new strap, sometimes finding a strap is a nightmare.
It is. I think one of the things that annoys me, and a little segue into this guy, there's a lot of watches that have like odd strap sizes. So this one, it's an Omega Speedmaster. It's got a 19 millimeter lug width. Just to go buy a 19 millimeter strap, I mean, they exist, of course, because there are a lot of watches with a 19 millimeter lug width. But it's a pain in the ass because there's way fewer of them. So you have fewer choices. I just wish there was a little bit more universal kind of ease to buying straps. However,
Agreed.
I will say this. If you're not using quick release, why?
Oh, yeah.
Why?
It's 2024, guys. Come on.
It is 2024. Just put a quick release. It's not, just don't make people use strap tools.
Especially as a woman with nails.
I know, right?
There's nothing worse. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not busting out a strap tool. Someone else is changing a strap. I'm not doing it.
I'll do it, but I hate it because it's frustrating. Like, I don't want to sit, it's a lot of, it's like delicate work too. You're sitting there trying to, if you have a strap tool in here, you're like, I don't want to scratch the lugs. Like it's a whole pain in the ass. So having a quick release strap is key. So we'll talk about this watch a little bit. This one has a story behind it. So Alex Lubin is a friend of ours. He had one of these. It's a CK2998. And so I borrowed it for a long time and I was wearing it and I like really kind of fell in love with it. And then, I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't buy it. And then I was, still sort of, but I still was sitting in the back of my mind. It was just like, you should buy that watch. So fast forward a little bit. I'm in London. It's March of 2020. And I, was talking about it to a friend of mine, Dave Sharp, who runs our London chapters and kind of heads up all our UK chapters. And he said, I have one. Stickers are still on it. He kind of wanted a Slim de Hermes, the titanium Slim de Hermes. So I picked up a Slim de Hermes. I traded him for that right before the world shut down. So this was like the last pleasant trip I had. This was like a very vibrant memory of like good times right before lockdown when everything sucked really bad. This one's also on an Hermes strap. And I will mention that their deployant is probably the most comfortable deployant I've ever worn.
I've always said that every watch collection should have a Speedmaster. I always gravitate towards an interesting Speedmaster like that too.
Yeah,
Something that's a
exactly.
little different, tells a story. We love a standard moon watch, but I love that it's on a strap. I love that you can change the look.
Also, the dial on this is just stunning. It's like it's like a panda, but it's not, because it's blue.
It's almost
with
like
subdials.
a teal.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. So this is the only Rolex in my collection. It is a Datejust, which I also bought from Analog Shift. See also James Lambden being clear and present.
Hi,
danger
James.
to my wallet. This one was. This one is a very cool piece. It's got this Tahitian mother of pearl dial, so it looks different at every angle. It looks black at this angle, and then this way it looks like rainbow. It's just such a beautiful dial. It's got a little give to the bracelet, so it's super comfy.
Good, yeah.
It's super comfy, and it's a great watch. I don't wear it as often as I used to. I think probably 80 watches in my collection. There's a it's a little bit of a problem, but it is stunning. I also had a manicure done that matched this dial. She recreated the striations on the Tahitian mother of pearl on my nails,
which is insane.
It's so cool, and she
has really gone somewhere.
Amazing. She did such a good job with it.
It's a very Kathleen Rolex,
right?
And I think before we talk about the last watch, I think we should definitely talk about your nails really quick, because you were just talking about your previous mother of pearl set.
It's true. So yeah, I have my nails done all of the time. Right now I have Nightmare Before Christmas nails, because it's right before Christmas. That's how I am embracing.
Holiday nails.
That's how I'm embracing this holiday. It's like Christmas, but make it goth. But yeah, my the person who does my nails now is amazing. This is not a decal. She hand painted Jack Skellington on my fingers. She has done some watch related nail sets as well. She actually did a nail set that looked like the dial of this watch, because I was going to British Watchmakers Day. It was the first time they were doing British Watchmakers Day, and I wanted to honor this watch, which is the Fears Christopher Ward collaboration piece that they did to benefit the British Watch and Clockmakers Association. So it's using essentially a version of the same movement that's in the bel canto, except it's a jump hour instead of a chiming watch. But the nails that she did, where she took the concentric circles that are in the center of the dial and made those on my nails with like a toothpick before the polish dried. I try to be thematic, so if there's some kind of major watch thing coming up, and I can think of a tie-in to a watch dial or an inspiration from a color of a dial or from a particular movement or something like that, I'll incorporate that into my manicures as well.
I think that's really interesting. Also, you said it was for British Watchmakers Day. And I mean, looking at this array, there's only about 10 watches here, but you have watches made in multiple different countries. Not everything is just Swiss. Watches are being made all over the world now, and the quality is still just as good. So obviously Japan with Grand Seiko. You've got some
British brands.
You obviously have Brew being made in the US. So I think that's amazing and shows the versatility of your collection.
We go back to the micro brands or the independent brands. People are thinking outside the box. They're not being constrained by, what a corporate entity thinks is going to sell. Right? They're going, this is a cool idea. I like it. I think it's great. I'm going to put it out in the marketplace. And I love seeing all of this stuff. It's just, there's just so much room for creativity and interesting complications, interesting dials. There's just so much going on now that it's really fun to kind of watch that all emerge and see where it's going.
So obviously, I'm sure all of the viewers are wondering, wow, Kathleen goes to all these different shows. So as I previously introduced, you are the CEO of Red Bar, the official queen of Red Bar, if you guys didn't know. And she is almost at every event, especially in New York. So let's talk a little bit about that. How did that come to fruition? So
Red Bar was founded by my business partner, Adam Craniotis. He started it in 2007, which was, it was literally just two dudes that met each other at a watch collector event and realized that they worked nearby each other. So it was Adam and this guy, Dr. Jeff Jacques, who was the sort of co-founder, first member. It was very informal. It was basically like there were no meetup groups back then. There was no in-person stuff. So if you wanted to obsess about watches and talk about watches with people, you did it online. And then, and then you talked about it until your family told you to shut up, And so they started getting together, and then soon people started to come, and it sort of started slowly growing. Now, I have been friends with Adam for 25 years, and we had kept in touch over social media. And so after a while, Instagram came out. He was posting all these like shitty, dark photos of watches, like with terrible lighting. And I messaged him and said, well, what are you doing? Why are you in the dark bar, like hunched over table looking at watches every week? And he said, well, come on out. And I said, okay. So I went there with my spouse at the time, and we said, we've got a couple. We had like a Tag and a Movado and a couple of, like a mechanical Nixon or something. We didn't have a big watch collection. We had a ton of swatches though. So we went, and Adam said, oh no, it's no problem. Bring your swatches. There's no snobs. And I was like, okay. And I showed up and I tested that theory. All we brought was swatches. And we put them on the table in a big roll like this. And people were like, oh my God. And they're taking off Pateks and Rolexes and picking up swatches and remembering ones that they had as a kid and looking at the rare ones we had. And I was like, oh, actually no snobs is actually true. So I said, this is cool. This is a fun experience. So I very quickly was able to learn in a no pressure environment. It very quickly got me into collecting in a pretty deep way. I kept going every week and it kept growing, and there were new chapters forming in other cities and that kind of thing. It started to snowball, and there was a point in time where Adam said, I need help with this, like actually getting his arms around it. And since then we went from I think we maybe had 9 chapters then. And now we have 93, I think at last count, around the globe. But it's really great. And the thing I love about it, where I'm traveling and doing all these things, is where, I've partnered with a few brands where we've done a Red Bar Roadshow, go visit local chapters, with the brands. And that's been really successful. So we're going to continue doing that. The thing I love about Red Bar in general, you come for the watches, but you stay for the people. The community around this is amazing. I've met people in my collecting journey that I would have never met in real life, ever.
Yeah, the sense of community it's a very safe space.
It is.
And something I definitely want to talk about, like being a woman in the watch industry. You were a woman in the watch industry before there were many women in the watch industry.
This is true.
Yeah. So how did you maneuver through that? Let's talk about that.
Well, as I mentioned, I have a background in technology. Before this, I spent 25 years in tech. I was the hands-on person going into corporations and, installing server software and doing all of these things. So I was a hands-on technical person, which is a very male-dominated field. And I would often walk in the room, be the only woman in the room. So I was kind of used to it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that big of a change for me. What I think was challenging about it is the preconceived notions a lot of the industry hold about what women want. Small quartz, diamonds, And we recognize that men want a dress watch or a dive watch or a aviation themed watch or, any kind of, there'd be categories of this, and then there's just women's. That was
to the side.
Yeah, to the side, yeah. And that was the biggest challenge for me is to see that and try to challenge those notions, because when I was interacting with women in the collector space, I wasn't seeing any of those watches that were under the women's sign in the store on their wrists. I was seeing this kind of stuff. And I've seen there's been a lot of change there, especially, there was a lot of conversation about it during the pandemic, where Cara Barrett wrote an article on Hodinkee about why are we even gendering watches, right? And that was summer of 2020. And then Watch Femme was born, the women's watch community. And we all were, the conversations about this were happening. And I think we're seeing a little bit more of a trend. I wouldn't say trend. I think a course correction in that, brands are starting to recognize that you don't need to market in this old way anymore. You can just be this is a watch. It's cool. So that's, I think, was the biggest challenge. It was never, I never faced anything, well, there were things, and there were a couple more egregious examples of somebody making really incorrect assumptions about my knowledge level. But for the most part, it's been pretty good. People have been very respectful and cool. They're just like, oh, you're a nerd, you like watches? Great. And I think it's getting better. I think, we're getting a little bit more prominence of like women's voices, in the journalism side, in the retail side, in executive positions in some of the brands.
Which is amazing.
I went to the Audemars Piguet manufacturer in 2014. Okay. And I walked the floor. Half of the people that were making watches, that were assembling the watches, that were testing the watches were women. It's not like there's the industry has just no women working in it. They're just not out front.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think we're starting to see a little bit more, that we're seeing women who've been working in the industry this whole time, working their way up and becoming leaders in the businesses. And I love to see that because it reflects the actual reality of the diversity of the workforce. I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see more women being prominent in the industry.
What would you say to any of the women that are watching that maybe don't feel comfortable going to an event, or, haven't broken into the industry and don't feel necessarily comfortable like going into a watch store?
Well, that's interesting. I think going into watch stores can be hit or miss.
It can be aggressive. I mean, it's just like going into luxury stores. It's
any luxury store.
I don't know if I want to buy anything today. Is this awkward?
Yeah, and I would say, like, no matter who you are, the people are there to show you watches. You're not wasting their time if you go in there and try a watch on for the first time that you've never seen before, even if you're not ready to buy that day. It's okay. If you're new to it, you can gain knowledge by, reaching out to your local Red Bar chapter or other communities. There's lots and lots and lots of watch clubs out there. You can go into stores and check things out and ask questions. And if someone treats you poorly because you're a woman or a person of color or anything like that, walk out. Like, you don't have to take that. You will find someone awesome like Kirklyn who is going to take the time to talk to you about watches and answer your questions and help you become knowledgeable about this and figure out what it is that you like.
And I've always said, I've been in the industry almost 5 years now. I've always said, I would much rather you not buy a watch from me and walk away and say, I learned so much from her. Like, that was an amazing experience. I'll buy from her later, than buy a watch that you regret.
To go back to the community aspect of it, there's Red Bar chapters kind of everywhere. There's also lots of other watch communities that you can join. And almost like everyone, again, with very few exceptions in the watch community that I've met, is super welcoming. They're like, hey, are you new to watch? Did you have one watch? Did you just inherit your dad's watch and you don't know what it is? Like, come on down.
Come on down.
Come on over. We'll talk to you about it. Because the thing that I love about this is, like, if I showed up at a Red Bar meetup with all of these, someone would find one of these and ask me a question about it. And I'm more than happy to share my knowledge. And almost everybody in the watch community is the same way.
And there is a wealth of knowledge everywhere. I mean, there's definitely books. You can learn from people around you. And I would say I've learned the most from people around me, just sitting down, having conversations, talking watches. I will absolutely shout out James Lambden, who Kathleen has probably learned a lot from too.
That's
but
true.
Don't feel scared to ask a question. Like, there's never a stupid question in terms of watches.
No, and I will say too, there's a lot of resources out there. Hodinkee has like 101 section where you can learn the terminology. Like, the jargon tends to be a little, I don't know, it's a little intimidating at first. But most of it's, most of it's easy to learn. Like, you just need to know what the terms mean. So there's a lot of online resources as well. And actually, Analog Shift, I'm just going to keep plugging you guys on your show. The website, even if watches are sold, there's a lot of information. The sold watches still are, sometimes on the site, and will have the description and like tell you background about the watch. So if you want to learn something about a vintage piece, you can go find, sold listings and read about them. So you can learn a lot just by poking around on the internet too.
100%. So you and I are both definitely fashion girlies at heart. For those of you that don't know, my first pair of tabbies, I bought them with Kathleen because,
true.
As we know, she's the queen of Margiela. Now I have 3 pairs. She has, how many pairs of tabbies do you have?
40.
40 pairs? I did not know that. So
I like
starting,
what I like.
starting from when? When did you get your first pair?
My first pair of tabbies I got in 2005.
So what about Margiela does it for Kathleen?
Well, tabbies specifically, because they're a little bit off-putting, I think, at first to some people, which I think is kind of funny because it's just like wearing flip-flops except with a closed toe. Like, people are scared of them. They're like, oh, it looks like you have hooves. And I'm like, it's just a flip-flop. Anyway, but I find them aesthetically very pleasing. I like the inspiration that the designer took, that Martin Margiela took for them, which is from Jika tabby shoes that are worn in Japanese martial arts. I tend towards more avant-garde designers, so like Margiela or Comme des Garçons, or things that are a little off the beaten path. I'm not going out and just buying basics. Like, I tend to wear stuff that's a little more weird.
Well, and that's what I love about New York City. I mean, somebody can be walking down the street in the craziest outfit you've ever seen, and it's like,
Okay.
nice outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, usually that's the only comment I get. Like, if I'm walking down the street and I'm wearing something completely outrageous, it's usually someone complimenting me.
Yeah.
Like, I might get looks, but I don't pay attention to that because I'm trying to get where I'm going. But most people, they'll be like, that's really interesting, or that's really cool. But it's what I like. This is kind of my philosophy about watch collecting as well. I buy what I like. Full stop.
As you should, and I think that's definitely advice for everyone through their watch collecting journey. You know, we all know there was a big kind of boom during COVID, but in my opinion, this is stuff to keep forever, for lifetimes, and to pass it down. Buy what you like. If something speaks to you, even if the size is weird, even if it's small, if it has diamonds, buy what makes you happy.
Buy what makes you happy. That's exactly it. I have never really enjoyed the categorization of watches as an asset class. Yes, they are worth something. And yes, you should insure them. But I don't love the idea of being like, well, I'm going to buy a Daytona because I expect it to increase in value, and then using that as an investment vehicle. I don't love that. Like, just buy the watches you like.
So speaking of that, what's next on your agenda? Where do you see your collection going?
Well, I am trying to downsize a little bit because 80 watches is too many. I'm gonna aim for maybe 52. Maybe we get it down to like one for each week of the year.
Okay, makes sense.
Maybe. We'll see. I don't really have anything on my radar to purchase. I'm kind of good. I really like my collection right now, and I'm kind of happy about it.
It's amazing to see someone with such a personal sense of style in the industry and bring something totally different in a good way. And you definitely inspire a lot of women, including myself.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your presence. Well, guys, I think that's all from Kathleen and I today. Thank you so much for spending the morning with us.
Thank you.
For those of you watching, we got here at 8 a.m. It's a lovely, rainy New York morning in December. But anything to spend some time with the lovely Kathleen McGivney.
Thank you so much.